I can close that one.
You mean the Facebook one?
Both tabs.
Yeah.
The YouTube one and the Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Alrighty, where'd that go? Zoom meeting. Admit. Alrighty. Hello there, Mark. This is Lyra and Nate. We're not using the video side on this end. Okay. So I need to use this one. All right, can we hear over here? Is it an echo? It sounds kind of like an echo. Okay, unmute. Maybe mute that one. How about now? You may not be able to do this. It may just be online. That's okay. All right. Are we getting this worked out? Work it out. Work it out.
There we go. We're in.
We're going to make this work.
We're in. We're in.
I think we're in. What do you think?
Okay.
Are we in?
Oh my God, what was that? How you doing?
Well, it's another day here in California, and it's kind of cold this morning.
Is it?
Which I'm sure is nothing compared to other parts of the world, but it's still cold to us.
Yeah, right.
How about here?
What's the temperature like over there? What do you classify as cold?
40, 42.
What's that in centigrade? Do you know? That's like, fuck knows. I have no idea. That's like 42 Fahrenheit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never do anything in Fahrenheit, so I have no idea what that is in centigrade. But yeah, it doesn't sound particularly warm.
Not particularly warm, but you know, we deal with it. We do have our heater in the RV that we use to keep things warm. Wake up in the morning and warm it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. I always see you guys in like a vehicle on the move.
We are mobile in many ways. So yeah, we have an RV. It's a Ford Winnebago Warrior 1992. And it has a 350 horsepower, or what is that? I don't know. I'm not very familiar with all the ins and outs in a vehicle, but yeah, I bought it about 1.5 years ago.
Right.
And refitted it.
Nice.
Refit it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, cool.
And then, so yeah, we've been on the road, getting connected with people, checking out what's going on in the communities here and how things are, like whether they're working or not, and what we can do, if anything, to help things along. Last year, we were at the Bay Area Community Service Center, and we were volunteering there and working on some plans to assist in incentivizing the homeless community into being more actively involved in their community resource center. Unfortunately, it was a bad management team that we were working with, and they weren't so focused on incentivizing the homeless. They were really there to focus on handing out anything that people ask for if those people do what they ask them to do. So it was like there was this sort of incentive, but you were favoritized, and it wasn't any kind of democratic process.
Right. Yeah, well, I think, I mean, you know, the world's been pretty much built on that kind of ideology and system architecture up until now, which is obviously why everybody's like, okay, so how do we change that exactly?
Right.
So, you know, so yeah, I mean, I totally get that. So yeah, so basically I had a look through your document that you sent over, and just so that we've kind of like got clarity at the moment on that, is obviously is something I need to take to others, because obviously I'm not the sole person that makes decisions on anything. So, you know, there's a group of people that is beginning to form around this project, of course. So it's something that we need to have a chat. I mean, I did do a precursory conversation with them, and like what the general feeling is at the moment around it is because yeah, so just to kind of, let me backtrack a minute actually, like, because it kind of put it in perspective. So I had some lengthy conversations with some of the people that have got like the tech solutions and the things that we're kind of looking to use, and basically the way that it's looking like it's going to form at this stage is that basically, like, there'll be kind of it's almost like there'll be a core data structure, which is what everybody will be able to access, like that kind of key part of information. So like the database that, you know, people will be able to you know, fill out information, and it will begin to kind of create that core. And then as far as like onboarding systems and you know, governance models and stuff like that on the kind of like the tech front, is the systems actually, the way that their software system operates and the way it's going to be constructed is that everybody will have their own user interface effectively. So, you know, so whatever it is and however you see your model interacting with the community would be like, you know, the Great Works Alliance front, that people can go in that way and, you know, can interact with it in whichever way that you construct that. So it's like everybody will be able to construct their own front to it based on whatever models, because then obviously then it means that people can choose whatever it is that they want, and they can come into it however they want, rather than it being like there's one system and everybody's got to do it like this, and or everyone's got to do it like that. It's like, you know, ultimately I think that's the bit that's not really going to kind of work if you've got people that are like, well, I don't want to do it like that, I want to do it some other way. So, you know, what we're kind of envisaging with it is a model that will enable everybody to be able to contribute, because everybody will be able to ultimately, when the system goes live, everybody will be able to just be like, right, okay, well, I want to build this in exactly the way that I want, and it's going to be completely user friendly. So it'll be like, you know, there won't be a case of like, you know, I need to employ like, you know, 10 coders that actually know what they're doing. Instead, it'll just be like drag and drop basically, and just kind of put it in exactly how you want it to be, and people will be able to interact with that. So that's kind of like how it will be constructed. But obviously at this stage where we're at with it is like, in order for all of those systems to be able to engage with the data that's kind of like, you know, the repository of organizations and tools and you know, companies that do, you know, whatever it is that organizations might want to bring into their communities, and stuff like that. Obviously, that's the bit that's being kind of thought out about at the moment. So basically, where the guys are at that I'm working with around that, they're like, you know, what they want to do is they want to kind of get a core, just a base architecture of what that would look like, because it's kind of like based on some of the ideas around, you know, the sort of Hellenic architectural system, you know, and some of the ideas around sort of Barbara Marx Hubbard's kind of wheel of co-creation, and like, and then a Hellenic system inside that will enable all of the different bits of information to be input into a structure, and then everybody will be able to then connect with that as kind of like the data core of the information. So basically, like the long and short of that, kind of coming full circle and coming back to the point, is that so yeah, so like where we're at the moment is, I think we need like a little bit more time, because some of the people that are working on that, they're like, that's it, I'm done for Christmas now. I'm like, I'm not doing anything until the new year. So we're like, so I'm kind of at that stage now where, you know, I just got to wait for people to basically come back to work again, which will be like the beginning of the new year. And then when that happens, then, you know, I reckon that after maybe a couple of weeks, we should have something that's kind of at least you know, a starting point. And then once we're at that starting point, then we can kind of start looking at doing some agreements around beginning to share information and stuff like that. At that point, I think is probably the most sensible point, because at the moment, what I want to kind of really clarify what it is that we're doing and how that would then really work in terms of like other you know, other people beginning to engage with that, because like we've been through like this long process of because before I met you guys, you know, there was a few different social architecture people that I met, and I was like, yeah, you know, these guys need to have a conversation first and get into an alignment space, because obviously everyone's got their own ontology. So everyone's like, you know, they've got a system and they've got words that they use to describe bits of their system, and everyone's got their own ones, and none of them are the same. So it's like, even though some of them are like actually describing the same thing, they're like, the words are completely different. And when you start reading papers and you're like, they kind of look the same. Like they kind of even feel the same, but I'm not quite sure. So it's like, so I've been kind of like going through a process with a few of these people first, of like getting them just into a place where they actually speak the same language, and that's taken fucking months to actually reach that point where they're like, you know, in that place of alignment. And now they're kind of in that place of alignment. It's like, okay, well, before we start actually bringing on other people that have got, you know, completely different ontologies again, and like go through that process, which then kind of delays it, you know, an extra few months, we were like, okay, well, why don't we approach it from a perspective of like, let's create like just a core data structure that is like, okay, well, that's just the kind of information that's going to be required from organizations, people, etc., etc. And what are the connections between those pieces of information? If you see it in like a 3D kind of holographic system, like a Hellenic architectural system, what are all the kind of interconnecting points that connect people to projects, to communities, to organizations, to all of that kind of stuff? So we've kind of like, some of that's been being done, and just kind of beginning to create a framework around that. And we've got a database engineer that actually, that's what they've spent years doing, is actually like database architecture of like, okay, well, you know, you can kind of turn this into a system that's like that. And then once we've got a bit of an idea, or like a clearer idea as to what that is, then, you know, that's the system that can then be given to this software engine, and then the software engine can effectively create the platform. And that's that point when, you know, effectively all of the different people that are looking to have interfaces into that data architecture will then be able to go, okay, well, like, you know, we want to kind of come at it from this perspective, and they can input. I mean, this is the beauty of this system, is literally you can write what you want the system to do, and then it produces all of the back-end code for you in less than a second. You know, it can basically build platforms in like lightning speed, which is obviously, you know, but in order for it to do that, you kind of got to fit all the pieces together. So like once we've kind of gotten this next stage out of the way, and we've kind of got a really clear idea as to, you know, the next bit of where all of the different players that I think have a very different lens on it, of how like they see it, or how they would like to integrate with it or work with this larger data piece of information. That's the bit where we were like, okay, well, let's get everybody in now, one at a time, and actually like really understand, you know, exactly what it is that they're wanting for their system. Because I think, like, I mean, you know, like all of the stuff that I went through, your you know, like some of the schematics that you've started to draw out of, like, you know, this into this. I mean, literally this engine, you can just, those pieces of like stuff, you can just load the files in and actually like, and then just tell it, like type in what it is that you want it to do, and then it'll create all of that for you. You're not going to have in less than a second. You
That'll
don't
be awesome.
need to spend, yeah, exactly. You don't need to spend like months getting somebody to code it. And that's kind of like what we're sort of envisaging with it. Is like, you know, once we've kind of created that baseline, and then get everybody to kind of like adjust it with what they think should be added to that, then we'll have like that, like a core data center, and then everybody else can create their own user interfaces based on their own specific models, and all of those will integrate into that system, so that it doesn't matter where you move it to, whether it's a community or it's a city or it's a, you know, whatever it is that you're looking to integrate it into, people will be able to have choice. They can go into it whichever way they want. And then it also means that if people build their own websites, because the way that we're seeing it around the stewarding of this system is, we're not looking to have it branded like any name particularly, like it's not belonging to us or, you know, anybody else. It's just, I mean, we haven't come up with a suitable name, but we're looking to describe it in the way of what the actual thing is. So there's no like branding, so that no one's going, but I want my name on it and all that kind of stuff.
Universal Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, exactly. So what we were thinking around it, I mean, like, you know, obviously we haven't kind of arrived at this spot yet, but, you know, let's call it a synergy hub. So it's like the digital synergy hub, and everybody can have their own like gateway basically to that portal system. So the portal is the data structure and the core at the center of it. And then everybody, depending on what their personal lens is, because like I'm coming at it from a, you know, my interest isn't so much the like the governance architecture of it. It's not so much like even the community aspect of kind of like building communities. It's more like the plugging in of like the regenerative data system that I'm building, and actually connecting that in, and connecting in the financial pieces as well, so that they kind of connect into it. So that's kind of where I'm coming at it from. So like for us, it's like, you know, there'd be a sort of higher status global, which is the financial engine that will connect to it. And then, you know, the Open World Alliance will just be a gateway. If people want to kind of like become a member of, then they'll go through a process that will just naturally guide them into that space anyway. And then it's like people like yourself and Brett and Andrea and other people that have kind of got more the governance onboarding and that kind of models, and that'll be like the other lens. So there'll be lots of kind of gateways in to a more kind of global based system, is kind of how we're sort of seeing it. And with the tools that that these guys have got, I mean, it's totally doable.
Awesome.
And it'll be totally doable to do it like that, so that we can all kind of have our own lens. But the other thing is, like, and I think this is something that I think, you know, we need to unwrap probably at a bit of a later date with you guys anyway, is like you sort of mentioned in the paper that you see this as something that you're doing to make profit. Is that right? How do you see that? What's your financial model around it?
Yes and
Sort
no.
of.
It just all depends
It's-
on the angle you're looking at. The MVP definitely lends itself to a profit model, like the outreach focused donation portals.
Okay.
That go in the inverse of the standard model that we're accustomed to. So you put the name of the organization or company or whatever on the back burner, and you prioritize like your first view is what kind of focus are you attracted to? Do you want to contribute to?
And arts and music. Do you want to contribute to preventing homelessness and preventing hunger? Are you interested in putting money towards regenerative programs that deal with agriculture? You know, just starting from there. And then and it's based on the level of impact of the organization in that sector. And it's also got the peer-to-peer auditing that we placed into it.
So like voting and stuff like that. Not just who's throwing the most money at it, or not the standard metrics, but inclusive of viable metrics on the long term. So people that aren't throwing a bunch of money at it because they're small and they don't have access to it yet, but they have huge improvement factors. Like, hey, I'm just asking you questions as to what would you like to do, and that methodology has put you on a fast track to your level of improvement. For the actual quality of life impact, that would be better measured with these metrics. Get closer to the grit of truthful impact with less focus on labels, basically.
Like the Salvation Army, for example, we're not going to say, oh, well, we're asking for donations to help the Salvation Army in their mission. What are we doing? We're saying we want to procure donations to assist homeless people with services that Salvation Army and other organizations are presenting. And we want to make sure that that money can be tracked. Like, it's not just going into a slush fund that can go to managerial or administrative costs. It should be going directly towards what it's supposed to be for.
In addition, and that's just an example, but in addition to that, anchor it in their local location, which lends itself to competitive nature between different geographical areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
It lends itself to gamification and
competition.
And it would be able to utilize a funding pool to help balance different metrics and levels of outreach within that localized area.
And of course, we do ask for, I believe it was a 15%. What is it?
There's lots of different areas.
But
what we can go over.
But I mean, there's a certain amount of money that would be put right back into Great Works Alliance and funding the projects and the support network that we're working on building.
Right. Okay. I was just wanting to kind of like, understand what the model was around that. That's all, basically. Okay, cool.
That's just one. That's just one. There's a lot of different, like, if you go through the financial plan that I believe is chapter 16 or 17 We list out 8 different categories that we're looking at for funding pools to achieve the mission for Great Works Alliance. And this does not include the other branches. So we're looking at a multi-pronged approach. Like, you know, when we were talking yesterday to another gentleman, he wanted to know, are we just a 501c3 or are we a faith-based church, or, you know, and the thing is that there are different pieces for different actions and different projects. Not all of it is going to be nonprofit. Not all of it's going to be for-profit. Not all of it's going to be faith-based, but it's that interlinking of those different models to sustain everything that we're looking at here.
And not to exclude any other organization, the whole concept was together that can be adoptable and modified by contribution, you know, from either party, whether it's us or Open World Alliance or Our World. It doesn't matter. It's just whoever's in synergy or in alignment. What can you bring to the table to make this better for everybody as a core to have as an adoptable model, and then go off into the experiment with a good footing.
Mm. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I found the, you know, when I went through, I found it interesting. You know, I'm finding at the moment I'm finding all of the different models right now, like around kind of like different ways of social structuring, is super fascinating. You know, there's lots of different ideas around there, you know, around at the moment that a lot of people are kind of like thinking about, you know, is it this, is it that? And I mean, ultimately, I think what's going to work is like, you know, it's going to be a bit of everything, isn't it? I mean, like, you know, decentralized governance models is that everybody gets to choose what works for their community most effectively. And you know, ultimately, I think that will be the thing that works, is when we create something that gives people choice, that they can choose however it is that they want to operate their community and their system. Have you seen the most recent video that's come from the guys at Seeds, the platform that they've been building, like the community building platform?
It's great. We're excited at the possibility of talking with Mickey at some point in the near future.
Yeah.
And anybody else he's got on his team, you know, for the appropriate things. You were talking about these different models and ontologies.
Yeah.
If we can get these different groups to put together, like on paper, in spreadsheets and stuff, their ontologies and a glossary, then we can do it like tracing paper, you know, overlap them and see what the difference is when we have them having different terminology for the same thing. Let's look at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the problem with that, though, because like I've already been down that road, right? The problem is the first part of it is actually getting them to get into the description of what the ontology is describing, because there's like obviously, because like what I found was because there's a couple of systems that I've been kind of like working with them, and I've been like involved in all of their conversations as they've brought their systems in alignment with each other. Oh my God, it was like such a lengthy process, because it was like both of them had to go through each other's full onboarding process so that they actually understood each other's lenses. And then once they'd kind of both gone through the full process, they then had to like then have them down on like a step-by-step process in alignment, so you could actually see them side by side of like, this is the same as this bit, that's the same as that bit. These guys don't have that bit, but then they've got a different bit that isn't the same as that other bit. and like, and then there's, oh no, there's both of you have got that bit missing that other person's got, and it's like, oh my god, fuck. It's like
we need a really big board, move things around,
yeah,
all in a collaborative meeting.
yeah, like the size of a wall.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's freaking ginormous.
Yeah,
yeah.
we've done some in that spreadsheet, the parametric spreadsheet on the allies page, regarding taking different organizations' metrics and listing them out, like what they're measuring, what they're talking about. One of the issues we have been having is that there's one group that's putting together some kind of a platform. They're trying to do it through
Buddy Boss.
Buddy Boss. And
Yeah.
we've been asking for the head guy to give us like just the basics of, he's talking about sacred geometry and how he wants to do this funneling through the sacred geometry of the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, so forth, all the way up to 8. And yet when I've asked him for just a little short statement about each of these sacred geometry numbers, he can't give it to me.
Okay.
I mean, you know, how am I supposed to coordinate and organize with the chakras and with the community sectors and with the social sectors if you can't just give me a little brief statement about what the sacred geometry of 1 is and what the sacred geometry of 2 is? I mean, yes, there's all kinds of information out there that you can point to and I can read through it.
But
yeah, you need to know what somebody's own specific thing is. That is, yeah. Do you know what? Because I've been having exactly the same thing around like the regen database, right? I mean, that's like a massive project with loads of organizations that have all got data stored in their own way. That is like, you know, that's amazing information, but nobody stores it in the same way as anybody else stores it. So there's about 25 different organizations, and it's everything from, you know, like waste management or agriculture, agroforestry, permaculture, energy, like all these kind of different things, and all of these organizations have collected information and filed it, libraries of stuff, like, you know, really different. So we were just like, oh my god, this is going to take like forever to actually try and like create some kind of unification. And then fortunately these guys came into the field and they were like, yeah, we've got a machine that does that. And they were like, you can basically just load everything in, connect APIs to it, drop in all the files and tell it how you want that data to be unified, and it just unifies it all for you. I was like, hallelujah.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so yeah, I totally get it. It's like that process of like trying to find where systems start to connect, you know, and finding those threads where they're the same, where you can kind of like start to have kind of like core data architecture that sits underneath that. I mean, that again, I mean, this kind of brings me back around to like this idea around, you know, having a core data architecture that is just a unified field of all information with very, like, you know, nothing is named that isn't specific to what that thing is. Yeah. Like, so because there were some people where I've seen like some of their data architecture around kind of like social architecture, and they're calling things like, you know, this is the field, this is like grass, this is water and air, and you're like, yeah, what does that really actually mean though? Right. Like when we get down to brass tacks, it's like what you call air, water, grass and everything else is like somebody else is just calling it by what the actual thing is, or the, do you know what I mean? It's like suddenly they don't communicate. And it's just like,
we have no clue.
We have no clue.
No, we have discussions between ourselves about that very thing. I'm like a grammar Nazi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm good at translating some things, but he's good at translating other things. So we end up getting into like how can we help with the translation of others? You know, because this is about the linguistics and how to identify the correlation of the differing linguistics in a manner that's going to be clear and concise. Now, I'm a woman, but I'm all about order. I am ambidextrous, so, you know, it's like I use both sides of my brain. A lot of people can't. I would love to see some program out there started for people to start learning to become more ambidextrous, because we're engaging far more of our brains when we do so. That's just a little tidbit over on the side. We can put it on a shelf now. But the idea here is we want to encourage people to use and interact and become more actively engaged in their own brain development. Because when I was 11 years old, I had a traumatic brain injury. The doctors at the hospital said I would never go to college, I would never go to high school, I would not graduate any of those. And I was going to be at an 8th grade reading level for the rest of my life. Here I am, and it's not the case. And it's because I fed my brain. I said, you know, I got to do these things to feed my brain so that I can overcome these challenges. If we can give people through this correlation and organization of information that is appropriate and backed up by science and you know, validation, truly validated, then we can help others do the very same thing, whether it is to recover from a traumatic brain injury or if it is to recover from all kinds of other things. And then on top of it, recovering our planet. You know, how do we recover our planet? What are the factors that are issues in our planet? A lot of people talk a lot about carbon, the carbon footprint. One of the fastest ways for us to fix that is to grow plants. And plants will just eat the carbon up. We also have other factors of global warming that are not being talked about at all. Every time that a satellite is shot up into space, there's a whole bunch of toxic chemicals that are released. Those toxic chemicals are up to 5,000 times more detrimental to our environment than carbon dioxide. But that's not something people talk about. You know, it's like the flat screen TVs that break. Every time a flat screen TV breaks and is left out in the sun, all of that goo that created that screen then goes into the air. And it is extremely toxic to our environment. So
yeah, I'm well aware. Like, I mean, the climate change and all of the things that contribute to that, that's been like the main thing I've studied over the last 15 years.
So you know where I'm coming from then, because it's like when people say, oh, it's just carbon, if we reduce our carbon footprint, we'll be great. You know, it's like, no, wait a minute, let's look at all of these.
Yeah, I mean, it's multi-layered. It's multi-layered.
Yes, sure.
I mean, obviously, I mean, there's loads of different ways that you can start to change the longer term effects. I mean, certainly carbon sequestering is a step in the right direction for sure. You know, but then also engaging people in, you know, being more mindful of what they use and how they use it. You know, you start engaging people on a community level, and actually David Gershon is doing some really amazing work in that particular field on how to become, or how to create carbon neutral cities. You know, over the next 20 years, he reckons with the right amount of funding, and it's not a lot actually, of funding, they could actually get the whole world's cities carbon neutral within 20 years.
Oh, I bet.
Oh yeah, Greenland.
So it's like, you know, so there's lots of things, but yeah, I mean, you know, there's lots of other aspects. You know, obviously, if you're eating meat, you're eating beef and stuff like that. Methane gas is a massive contributor to global warming, and you know, by them, the more people do that, the more they're cutting down forests to graze cattle, and you know, it's like tipping the balance. I mean, there's all sorts of things. I mean, it's that there's no one fix for that. That's a multi-layered issue that really needs, you know, a lot of outside of the box thinking, and also just changing the mindsets of people generally.
And changing the diet of the cows. Cows are not meant to eat corn. Okay, I have an organic agricultural degree from, which one was it? Oh, I can't even, I've been to a few colleges. So, but UC Davis, that's right. Anyway, one of the things that I discovered when I was working on the project for Earth College and information about methane and the methane gas and how it's produced, it has to do with the diet of the cows. So as long as our ranchers and farmers, I mean, it's going to take a process to transition people from a meat-based diet to a vegetarian-based diet, healthier diet. In the meantime, there are ways that we can reduce the methane footprint of the cows by changing their diet. Cows are supposed to be eating grass, not corn. They're not supposed to be eating soy. Those are the two main fillers that the farmers are feeding the cows, is corn and soy. Sometimes oats, but not as much because oats are a little more expensive. But we have a gross amount of corn in this country that is not edible. Europe won't take it. Other countries will not buy it. And they can't make ethanol from all of it. A lot of the corn then ends up going into the cattle diet. And so that's what's producing that methane. And yeah, so that, I mean, for that little bit, but the idea here is we need to get this information more out there, more identified, and more clearly showing step-by-step solutions for these people to just say, oh, okay, if I go for grass-fed beef, yeah, I'm not ready to stop eating beef, but if I go buy grass-fed beef, then I am reducing the methane footprint.
Yeah, sure.
Right,
But then obviously they're still part of the issue because obviously more forests are being cut down to graze the cattle.
Yes, absolutely. So like, I'm not denying that, but
you know, ultimately it's like, you know, people need to just start to see the connections and choose to eat differently altogether.
Right.
And not be like just, well, I'm going to move from like, you know, corn-fed to grass-fed. It's like, well, look, what you really need to do is just become a fucking vegetarian.
But remember, we live in this world where people don't want to be told what to do. They want to have options.
Yeah, sure.
And so when we give them options, they can start exploring, and then they learn a little more after a bit. You know, they're starting to have a little clearer picture of what their footprint is and how that is created through what they're buying and consuming, you know, and it's all about those stages. And I know Nate doesn't like me doing the hand movement so much, but like to be able to be expressive and just, you know, being able to meet people where they're at. Sure. We have to be able to meet people where they're at in order for there to be real, effective, and lasting change.
For sure.
So this is great to, you know, connect with you and others in putting together a truly dynamic, versatile, federated organizational structure. I mean, it's a lot of work. There are a lot of pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to take some time to, you know, to pull all of the parts together, you know. It's but you know, there's a lot of the different people and organizations and stuff that we've been in communication with, you know, they're really open to it and really open to change. You know, they're really, you know, looking forward to seeing the tools that, you know, we've been kind of working on and stuff like that. And, you know, and some amazing contributors to this project in total. I mean, you know, I think I mentioned to you before, you know, we're in contact with around 2,000 different organizations. So it's like that have all got fucking wicked technologies. Oh my God. This shit's just going to blow people's minds over the next couple of years, like as this stuff starts to come out. Just absolute insane things that I'm actually really excited myself just to see what happens when you start to introduce some of these new things into, you know, into social, you know, communities. You know, things are just going to change. You know, people will stop using pharmaceutical drugs. They'll stop using oil-based products, and I mean, there's all kinds of different things. They're like really amazing. So yeah, so obviously as part of that, I mean, that's why we're like, okay, well, in order for this to really work, you know, we have to have a tool that can really onboard these organizations effectively, but also that, you know, there's choice, so that everybody can onboard however they want to onboard, and they can find what works for them. You know, that's what's really important to, you know, to me, and you know, to all the people, I'm sure it is to you as well, is that, you know, ultimately people have got the choice. To choose what works for them, and that's why I've been really interested in communicating with all of the different, you know, all the different social architects that are out there at the moment. It's like, okay, how are you seeing this? So it's like, you know, so that I can kind of understand, oh yeah, that's a really interesting, I can see how that might work for that type of community, but then maybe a different kind of a community will want that other model because that's more appropriate, or it's more culturally sensitive to where they're at right now.
Yes.
You know, it's like, so yeah, so it's a really interesting field. I mean, I've learned a lot. This year has been like just, oh my God, absorb loads of information. It's been really interesting.
That tool that you mentioned earlier, just drop it in there and it'll auto categorize, sort, and everything like that. Is that available yet? Play with?
It's not available to like general public to play with, because
I want to play with that kind of stuff now.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait.
Yeah, it's a software company, and as you can imagine, that tool itself is massively disruptive, and it's going to put like software companies out of business. I mean, it's huge. So they've been keeping it really secret. It's been like, you know, really, like they're really happy to use it for doing stuff that's going to change the planet. They're like, we're totally behind that. So, you know, at the moment I've been kind of working with, there's like a key holder between me and that piece of software. And we've been kind of like working really closely with that person around, you know, the technologies that he's got as part of his collective, and they're really open to, you know, to kind of connecting and using it and like, you know, integrating, because they've actually got some amazing social architectural pieces as well, you know, kind of new business structures and all kinds of different things that they're wanting to also integrate into the whole system. So at the moment we're kind of like, we're exploring the alignment between them and the other people that I've been kind of getting into alignment first, and then once they're in, that kind of unlocks the software tool for us. So like what we're doing at the moment is we've been kind of like planning the architecture with them of like the data, like the data layer at the core, at the center of it all. And we're working with him, these other social architects, and a database specialist, like a database engineer, to like unwrap that bit so that we can get that bit, like so that they all understand what that is and how that starts to interconnect, and then we can drop that into the system and then start plugging effectively the interfaces into it, because obviously the interfaces come after the core architecture of the data structure at the heart of it. And And then that's the bit where we're like, okay, all right, now let's open it up to all of that, because there's some amazing social architects that I've connected with that have all got like really different lenses, and they're really, every single one of them, you know, I see merit in everybody's, you know, everybody's got a really amazing idea of what something could look like, and I'm like, what's going to be really amazing is when you've got all of these things all being like gateways into a system that can manage people, so people can then onboard into that system, and then they can choose where they want to go. You know, it's like
Exactly.
there's a whole bunch of like, well, I want to do it like this, I want to do it like that, I want to do it however the hell I want to do it. You know, so yeah, so that's kind of like where we're at with that at the moment. So yeah, it's on its way. It's
Okay.
not like, it's not fully unlocked yet, but like they're completely open to it. They're completely open to it.
Okay, let us know what we need to do to qualify. If we need to have a meeting, go over any paperwork, you know, agreements, you're going to use this under this type of context, and if anything changes, you need to let us know. Sure.
Yeah.
Let us know what we need to do to be able to take advantage of that type of tool.
Absolutely.
Immediately.
And help with the whole, you know, that whole framework.
Yeah.
Structure.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's exactly where, I mean, because where we're at with it at the moment is, you know, that like the people that I'm working with, they're very like, you know, let's make sure that everything is in alignment with the people that are as part of that at the moment. Once they are in complete alignment, and then it's like, okay, let's bring the next person in, and then the next person in, and then like, you know, really kind of do it step by step, so it's not suddenly like loads of people all contributing all at once and then just a fucking mess. Obviously we want to make sure that there's coherence all the way through.
Right.
So, you know, in order to make sure that that's the case, we're really, you know, we're going as quickly as we can, but obviously we really want to make sure that it stays coherent all the way through. So, you know, at the moment we've kind of got like these core people that can kind of do that base architecture, which is like just technical stuff really, of like, how do you connect this to that, to, you know, how to make sure that they all start to communicate at the, you know, the base layer. And then it's like, okay, once that's in coherence, that's all aligned, that's all working, then it's like, okay, then we can start just bringing on all of the different people like yourself, like one at a time, like all of the different social architects, to start to look at it at different lenses and kind of like stress test it, basically, of like, okay, how does it work if you do it like this or like that? Does it, you know, if you poke it a bit like this or poke it a bit like that, does it all fall apart, or does it actually still like stays fairly sound? So that's kind of where we're at the moment, is just like, you know, getting that first layer robust so that everyone can then have their poke at it, and see where they go. But yeah, I mean, as soon as it's at that stage, of course, you know, you'll be amongst the first to know about that, because, you know, I really want to make sure that everybody stays informed of it, and that's why I'm kind of like, you know, I'm trying to continue to have updated conversations with people, just to be like, okay, well, look, this is where it's at the moment. It's going to probably take a few weeks to get this next bit after we come back from the Christmas fucking holidays. I don't do Christmas holidays, by the way, so that's not my choice.
The only thing we do for Christmas is sell wreaths.
Yeah, see, I don't even do that. I'm like,
I've never been a big fan of the holiday.
Yeah, I don't even do that.
And I'm used to, okay, tag me to whatever we need to do for a few hours, a day, whatever, and then, all right, I want to go play. My play is work. Let's
yeah, well,
cheers,
likewise,
guys. Let's have pizza and
yeah,
on the car or the truck, or framing up the remodel or something. You know?
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I'm exactly the same. Like my whole world is just working. I mean, that's all I do. I don't do anything else. It's like I just work.
What we're dealing with is pathetic. It should be so far advanced right now. It's not good enough. It's not up to par. So I want to direct my energy. You know, this is my perspective
Makes sense.
I want to focus my energy on fixing that screw up that others have contributed to, and I now have an ability to affect.
Yeah, well, exactly, and I feel exactly the same. And like, you know, my main goal is like, you know, regenerating the planet, and really like, you know, healing natural systems, really like, you know, bringing the planet back to what it should be, you know, and you know, because I've traveled a lot, and you know, I've seen so many different amazing places, beautiful places, and I'm just like, you know, it needs to stay like that, not like fucking a massive rubbish tip.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's time to really do something about that. So yeah, that's I'm totally with you on that. So I don't stop. You know, I work 7 days a week. 100-hour weeks are my standard, pretty much. You know,
Wow.
I just don't stop. You know, I mean, like this morning I started at 4 a.m. And here I am. It's 7:30 in the evening, and it normally goes until about 10 o'clock at night. And so it's just like, you know, just round and round the clock, round around the clock.
Sleep is for those who are dead.
Exactly. You're gonna sleep enough when you die, right?
That's right.
Yeah, just do enough for now.
Yeah, exactly. Just to keep the energy reserves up. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
wake up
exactly.
earlier than you.
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
always
6, but anyway.
yeah, I'm nearly always up early. But as a result of it, you know, I love those hours first thing in the morning. It's like when everything's peaceful, you can get so much done. The phone isn't going. It's like you're not getting loads of messages coming in. It's like it's just quiet, peaceful, super tranquil. From like that time from 4 o'clock in the morning till about 8. Oh my God, it's like you can fit a whole day's worth of work in those 4 hours.
Yes.
It's great. I love it. So yeah, so I mean that's because the other thing is like I'm like that first thing in the morning I do a lot of stuff around the trading software that we're building at the moment. So like that's coming together really quickly.
Oh, wow.
Because I haven't shown you that yet, have I?
No, you slacker.
Oh my God. I'll tell you what, like if I let me put this on, but can you turn off the record?
Yeah.
I'll show you the
Well,
stuff.
all right. So the idea I was looking for to share, and thank you very much, Mark, for sharing that whole system you are developing and creating. It is very extensive and like massive. And you know, I'm hoping that we can, you know, collaborate on whatever projects possible to help expand this in that kaleidoscope view. And I wanted to just touch very briefly on that agenda that I created. I used to be the secretary for the Family Rights Party, and that's why, you know, I have this format for meetings that we can implement and enable others to participate in. And yeah, we were just talking about like how we're going to create these agreements for working together in collaboration. I think that we touched on that quite a bit today. And so I just wanted to circle right back around and see what you have done as far as looking through those agreements, that master agreement that is in the presentation packet we shared with you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, as we continue, because it's going to take a while, of course, to formulate what metrics we're all going to work with together, right? So just to think about that a bit, and I don't know why it's not letting me go down. So then the second one was a little more along the lines of what you're talking about. This program, these tools are going to allow to happen faster, right? That was the governance model mapping. My down arrow doesn't work, I apologize.
That's all right.
Oh, I can.
Yeah,
Oh, well, look at that.
go on.
So yeah, and just let's keep on coming back to this, looking at these different governance models that are being presented today for the decentralized governance structures, and putting it together in some sort of a spreadsheet where we can all tap in and decide what pieces we want to use for what organizational structure we're creating. Because we have, like we were talking about earlier, nonprofits, and then we have NGOs, and we have for-profits and single owner businesses and political entities and all of this. And so there are certain rules that people have to abide by based on their structure, just on a baseline within whatever state or country that they're living in. And then on top of that, how do we make it so that it can convert into a less centralized, a more decentralized type of a scenario?
Yeah, well, you see, this is where like the some of the stuff that Oliver and Project Helix have got around, like where they've been kind of creating the legal structure for organizations to effectively deconstruct and reconstruct in a completely different way, that changes kind of like the whole profit model, starts to then be able to feed back funding back into the community in a couple of different ways. So, you know, what we're looking at as part of like a sort of an onboarding system for organizations, you know, certainly a lot of the organizations that I've spoken to already have all been like, you know what, they'd be very happy to adopt a model that, you know, they're no longer actually just doing things from an extractive perspective to make profits, but instead they're, you know, they're happy to kind of like start to pool that additional profits into like, you know, community funding pools. So yeah, so basically Oliver's been working on like proper legal structure with like a whole bunch of lawyers. I've actually got a meeting with some lawyers that's what they do actually, is this kind of like social architectural law-based stuff to kind of like new ways of doing things. So I've got a meeting with them next week because they've actually got, well, they're like, because what I was saying to them was basically, I was like, look, you know, we're about to have you know, a lot of funding that's going to come in, and obviously as part of that, I really want to make sure that we structure effectively so that you know, it'll enable funding pools to be made available across our whole, you know, our whole global network basically that we've got. So, you know, I'm having a conversation with her. She wants to kind of drill into our organization and how we are looking to structure it so that, you know, she can kind of look, and obviously as part of that, I want to also talk to her about, you know, this project that we're about to start to kind of engage with lots of other organizations as well as, you know, having, you know, us being a provider of the funding from effectively an old paradigm company that obviously has to be structured like that because it's a financial service.
Yeah.
So because of that, we have to have financial services licenses and that kind of stuff. So we have to be regulated, you know, all of that fucking crap that goes with all of that. So I'm having a chat with her about kind of like the legal integration of all of those parts of what that actually looks like, and what would be the best way to structure everything from our perspective and our own lens as to how that can then feed into these new kind of like decentralized systems and kind of new paradigm models that are beginning to emerge, and how we can kind of connect those two effectively. And obviously I'm wanting to do it in a way that, you know, avoids giving governments any tax as much as possible, because I just don't agree with funding terrorism. So you know, I'm kind of like looking at it as to how we can best do that. So kind of Oliver's been working on the, you know, organizations coming in and being able to restructure and just having that as effectively integrating that into their own articles of association, so that they would become part of a completely different model of business structure. But then obviously that's almost like at the kind of as a core part of a system as organizations come on board. But then, you know, how those organizations start to govern and self-govern, that's when you start to then get into the governance architecture, and that's kind of like that next layer of the social structure. So that's kind of like what we're looking at the moment, is like that base legal aspect, and getting that so that it's absolutely shiny and airtight. So that, you know, when organizations are like, okay, well, we want to, you know, we're really happy to become a company within this larger super organism that's beginning to emerge, then they can be like, okay, well, we agree that you know, excess profits that we make as part of our organization then become available to the community, whichever community we then onboard onto. So if they're like, well, we're going to be onboarding onto a community that does this thing over in that part of the world, or that community, it's like, well, then what they're bringing is, you know, their resources as their organization, but then also like any additional finance that's generated, that, you know, they pay all of their staff in integrity, and then beyond integrity is profit, and the profits are no longer shared out to shareholders and, you know, other people, but instead they're fed back into the community.
Sounds like a nice model.
Yeah.
So much.
Your voice keeps on drifting out, Nate. It's like it goes loud and then really quiet.
Our battery is getting close to dead. That could be a part of it. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why we've been focusing on the research to consolidate and gather this type of data and locate the template that ultimately forms, whether we agree with it or not. We need to know it because it's ultimately just a survey. We need surveys to get a lay of the land in order to have some sort of view to not go insane. You know, you don't want to repeat mistakes, and if you don't have landmarks, then you don't know where you're going, and that's just absolutely insane.
That's the definition.
Yeah.
So we need to get connected again, look into how we can more effectively serve the main objectives here through these lenses, and being able to provide the accurate data and information for people. I mean, you know, it's the manual. It's the human manual. So here we are, all working on our little pieces for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, though, isn't it? It's like every human's got their own manual, though, haven't they? It's like we've all got our own pocketbook that's like got our own like instructions that we're like, yeah, well, we kind of adhere to those, and it's like completely different to everybody else's. Yeah. And it's like, so how do you like just have a few rules at the beginning of the book that everybody's got in their book? That's like, you know, that then starts to make sense across all of like that whole kind of system. But I mean, that's, I guess, you know, like, because it's been really interesting, hey, like, because we've been like when I was first like having conversations about social architecture, it was with Josh Passmore from Green Earth Vision. So like I went through his onboarding process, and I started looking at his, and a lot of like the stuff around, you know, sense making and what have you that Josh has got is kind of like, has been adapted from Raymond Powell's Protocol Love stuff. So a lot of it's actually, it's super sound, you know, actually like so much of it made a lot of sense actually, as you'd expect for something that's supposed to be sense making, of course. And then like, but that was kind of like more based on people, specifically the individual onboarding into a community, and then how the community operates as a collective. But what Josh was like, I don't want to touch organizations. He was like, that's way too much. He was like, that's just fucking, you know, that's just a can of worms. He's like, I just don't really want to get involved with that. But then I ended up meeting like Brett and Andrea is like, you know, with the Together Life system is actually a whole system, meta architectural system based on kind of like Hellenic system architecture. And that was actually really well thought out, like incredibly jargony, like, you know, like everything had its own words, and I really had to like learn what that was. And then I was like, you know, I started seeing like the similarities between Josh and Brett and Andrew's work, and I was like, there's somewhere where these two pieces could meet in the middle. And that was like that first bit of alignment. I was like, you guys need to have a conversation, and let's see where you two meet in the middle. And I was like, I'm really interested to work with you guys in terms of like creating a platform that will enable all these organizations I'm talking to be able to onboard, sense make, and co-govern a new way of doing things. And that was kind of where it came about. And then as I've gone along, I've like then met people like yourself and like a whole bunch of other social architects that have also got other really interesting models. And that's made me go, yeah, now what's going to be really interesting is if we actually have like a platform that people could choose, and they can choose whatever they want, and they can come into it however they want. And I was like, now that's a much more, like in my head, that's a much more robust system, because it gives people choice.
It's that multi-prong approach that we identify with in some of the paperwork there, like the second chapter, we talk about templates being built and the metrics of those and the community impact, and then the individual impact. Those are just 3 prongs. And those are main prongs. Then we can go to the sub prongs of gamification in one area, information kiosks and databasing and resource analysis in another area, and peer-to-peer mentorship, and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, let's keep on building off of this. Let's see where this takes us all. I think it'll be great.
Yeah, exactly. I think like, you know, as we go along, you know, once I mean, you know, like with all these things, it's like it's a process of like, okay, well, let's look at it like this, and let's just kind of like keep on building blocks on blocks on blocks until we kind of get that whole system. Because you know, I think that, you know, there is some amazing things that are emerging right now, like, you know, all these kind of different players that are coming together, that have got interesting ways of looking at things and doing things. You know, I'm really you know, interested with Brandon also from Plan Systems, the integration of that as kind of community management tools, and beginning to bring that in as part of like these kind of like whole system architectural piece of like all of these kind of tools beginning to come together and start to communicate with each other. And I mean, that's like what I'm, you know, once our funding engine starts to kick in next year, I mean, that's kind of like where I'm kind of seeing that going really. Is like, you know, part of it goes into ecosystem restoration, but then the other part goes into funding these projects so that we can all like, you know, have the time and the space to integrate all the parts and really make sure that they all really work effectively and efficiently together. Because I think that, you know, the sum of all of the parts is going to be fucking epic.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, while you're doing your meetings and the rest of the weekend, anybody that you can think of or that you end up talking with that you see a good correlation on our current priorities, like shared priorities, please let us know ASAP. We want to be able to jump on it. Right now, we're going to be looking at format structure to properly get all the data that we have uploaded, like into Kumu. And I thought, okay, well, can't just stop at where Kumu has their data structure. We need to expand it out.
No.
Databasing structure need to be considered and at least mapped.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be working on a correlation breakout sheet on that for how does it extend out for what type of verbiage or whatever label you want act as this type of function. It doesn't have 20 different functions available within the coding, or 3. You know, is it a parent node or a child node? And this is someone that's not a coder that needs a coder's help.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it. It's like, you know, I'm not a coder either, but like, I mean, I've actually learned a lot about software design because obviously I've been designing a piece of software, and actually trying to communicate a system like what I've created here to a software development company that knows nothing about trading. Oh my God, that has been quite the mission.
That's why linguistic concepts like our taxonomies and glossaries are so important.
Yeah,
as well as going back to root languages like Greek and Latin, for example, that just end up covering the entire board. Once we can get those pieces together ASAP, the more it's going to help all these other areas and functions, including the end user portals or gateways or their control panels, you know, however we want to refer to them. We all have our own creative lenses that they kind of require this to be done.
Yeah, for sure.
In order to be fully functional and valuably used.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's so important, I think, to like call something what it is, as opposed to making a name up for it. Because the moment you do that, nobody's got a fucking clue what you're talking about.
Well, and sadly, people who are in the technology-based fields sometimes don't even understand the technology terminology, like node.
Yeah. Just referencing someone that you named already earlier.
Yeah, well, anyway, we're not going to go down that road. We just want to be able to make it a lot easier for everybody to understand and comprehend and be able to process within whatever brain cells they have left. And let's get them some more brain cells on top of that. Let's start building up those brain cells, right?
Yeah, for the short track. We're going to let you go. Let us know as soon as you can.
Well, as soon as like there's any further developments, I'll update you and let you know and keep you posted as to, you know, where things are at, and then as soon as as soon as I've got something that I think this is something that I should share, and then of course, you know, I'll forward that on, and then we can kind of like develop things further.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah. Cool, and have a wicked Christmas.
Yeah, right.
Cool.
The only one I know.
All right. Well, listen. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yes.
Bye. Bye.